Hey there, I'm Jeff Kingsbury. I'm the president of the Black Hills Playhouse Alumni Association, and I'm running the box office out here at the Black Hills Playhouse this summer. And boy, is it hot.
And I'm Mark Norberg, Alumni Association member, and I'm organizing this summer's 75th anniversary at the BHP.
Now, Mark Mearsman is a beloved member of the Alumni Association board, and he was telling me that back in 1987, he was working as the head electrician at the BHP. That summer, they mounted an amazing production of The Importance of Being Earnest. It was a huge hit and is fondly recalled by those who were able to see it. It left such an impression on him that he thought, wouldn't it be great if we could recreate some of that feeling from decades ago? So Mark suggested that we remount the show on Zoom. We could track down the original cast and do it as a fundraiser. Now, the siding on the Playhouse building is now pushing 70 years old, and we don't think it can last another winter. We need your help.
So this Zoom show is a reminder that none of us are 20 years old anymore, and neither is the theater building. And the building could really use your help.
Now, more on that later. For now, let me say how much I'm looking forward to seeing all of you this summer out at the Black Hills Playhouse.
And I look forward to seeing you all at our Zoom 75th anniversary show on July 24th. Emails have gone out with the link to purchase tickets to the day's events, as well as our first ever live stream of I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change.
Now, let's go back in time when everyone was walking like an Egyptian and watching Fatal Attraction and coming to the Black Hills Playhouse to see The Importance of Being Earnest.
Lane? Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
Oh, I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Oh, yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have observed in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage as demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself, having only been married once, and that in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person. Mr. Ernest Worthing, sir.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that's all very well, but I am afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Oh, how utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted, one usually is. Then the whole enchantment is all over. The essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I will certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
Well, it's quite a different matter. She is my aunt. And as far as Gwendolyn is concerned, there's no use in your speculating on marrying Gwendolyn.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin.
Hmm.
And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily. Algie, do you mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? Wish to goodness you had let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it.
It makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I see it isn't yours at all.
Of course it's mine.
But this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too.
But why does she call herself Cecily if she is your aunt? From little Cecily, with the fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself.
Yes. But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew or uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack, it is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to people as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I know. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. The cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily calls you her uncle. Come on, old boy, you had much better have it all out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist.
I may mention, I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you were Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And pray, make the explanation improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited.
Oh, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Algy, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have to always pretend to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives here in town, gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, no. What you are is a Bunburyist. I was quite sure in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a useful young brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
No. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives and creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for about 10 minutes so that you may be able to have the opportunity to propose to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
Feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together. Oh, how do you do, Mr. Worthing?
Dear me, Gwendolyn, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, that there were no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It has certainly changed its color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say.
Forgive me, Aunt Augusta, but I am afraid I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
Oh, I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out.
Well, the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
Well, I must say, I should be obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty, but I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Oh, thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Oh, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, I speak quite candidly. I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No, there's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely you know that I love you, and you've led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn?
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
I own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Oh, my own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your dear father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. Now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
In the carriage, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mamma.
Mr. Worthing,
Yes.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what our really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
Well, I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year. I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on that for my real income.
You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square.
What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal.
They count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evening at any rate. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am. By birth, I was found.
Found?
Yes, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles on it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the end of the season.
I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has this to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you?
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. Really don't know what a gorgon is, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. Algy, you don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is the tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. Besides, before the end of the week, I shall have gotten rid of him. My poor brother Ernest is going to be carried off quite suddenly in Paris by a severe chill.
But I thought you said your ward, Miss Cardew, was a little too interested in your poor brother, Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see you, Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty.
Have you told Gwendolyn you have an excessively pretty ward?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first.
Miss Fairfax.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate.
Hi, my name's Steve Hinkle, and I'm playing Lane the Butler, just like I did in the original production of Ernest back in 1987.
And I'm Damon Krall, and I'm recreating my role of Lady Bracknell now that I'm old enough.
Back then, the Playhouse theater building was 32 years old, which seemed pretty old at the time.
Well, now it's 66 years old, and it still has its original siding.
Barely. It's been deteriorating to the point where the elements are starting to damage the building, and there are so many gaps and holes that it's become a giant bat colony. I remember putting my foot through the side of it when I was repairing it at one time back 30-something years ago.
Well, when I first got to the Playhouse, and I had to think this summer is my 50th anniversary of the first summer I was there. I remember playing on the stage in The Lion in Winter. It was a fun show to do until we did the matinee, and I realized there's light leaking in the walls of the theater. It was only a young theater in those days, so can you imagine what it's like now? So that's what this Earnest reunion is all about, to raise funds for the new siding on the theater so it can stand for another 66 years.
Wait a minute, I thought the theater was celebrating its 75th anniversary this year.
Well, it is, Steve, and you can get tickets for the special anniversary event this summer at the BHP website. But the theater building was built in 1955. Before that, they were always touring in little small towns around the Black Hills, or they were in a tent.
And if we don't replace the siding, it will be a tent again.
So come on, click on the link below. Your generosity will help save the Playhouse from the elements.
Thank you, and please join the BHP this summer for a socially distanced outdoor theater experience starting next week.
So I'll see you online again this summer at the reunion. And now, back to the importance of being earnest.
Cecily! Oh, Cecily, your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know of no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
Yeah, I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes.
You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that the library sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. Oh, I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Oh, Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector arrived.
Oh, I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I am. Afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Uncle Jack's brother? Oh, did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. Oh, I'm so afraid he will look like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange misapprehension. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, it is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement. But still, I think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have had of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. You do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful, or they'll lead weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
Oh, and often I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. Mr. Worthing,
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother,
more shameful debts and extravagance.
dead,
Your brother Ernest dead?
quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Oh, very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris. In fact, I had a telegram last night from the manager at the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prison, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Ooh.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have got on.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
You look happy. I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about a half an hour ago.
What nonsense. Haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
Good heavens.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
But Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury.
Oh, he has been talking to you about Bunbury, has he? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else.
Of course, I admit the faults are on my side, but I must say that I think Brother John's coldness to me are peculiarly painful.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never. Never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
I think we might lead the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You young scoundrel, Algie, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I am afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it would be very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am slightly overdressed occasionally, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. Ah, and there she is.
I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Did we have to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one just has been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
You really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You could go on. Quite ready. Don't cough, Ernest. I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, you silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
The last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 22nd of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree there. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And oh, and this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It is pretty, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. Oh, and this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if I hadn't broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily. You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
Oh, I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. Oh, there's something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But, my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
What name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
Oh, I don't like her, Algernon.
I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not a bad name at all. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, could you not love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here, I suppose, is thoroughly experienced in the practices of all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes, Dr. Choswell is a most learned man.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business. I shan't be away more than half an hour. I'll be back in no time.
A Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon.
Yes, miss. Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
No, I live here.
Oh, really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations. I am in fact Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, well, it is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. In fact, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, dearest Gwendolyn, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
Oh, I am afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
But it is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon. I am afraid I have the prior claim.
You distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy might have gotten into, I will never reproach you with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
Save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl. There are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Gwendolyn!
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
Oh, I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack?
Oh! Here is Ernest.
My own love.
Oh, a moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Oh, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh, is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name certainly is John.
Oh,
Gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
my poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Yes.
This ghastly state of things is what you call bun-burying, I suppose?
The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack?
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that was quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all in your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. That is all. I love her.
Lee wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Algie, I wish to goodness that you would just go.
But I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I, naturally, will take the name of Earnest. I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anybody. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there's still one muffin left.
Hi, I'm Kim Aesop Wiley, and I'm recreating the role of Miss Prism, which I originally did in 1987.
And I'm Greg Giles, and I played a servant in the original production, and I'm playing a different servant this time.
Greg, there are no small parts.
Wanna bet?
Okay, so let's talk about the siding of the Black Hills Playhouse.
Siding, schmiding. Didn't they say in the last intermission that the Playhouse has become a giant bat colony?
Yes, there are so many holes and gaps in the siding that it has allowed bats to get under the siding.
And that's a bad thing?
Well, yes and no. Obviously, the siding should give the building a much better seal, which would keep the bats out. But bats are very important to the environment of the Black Hills.
So what happens to the bats when the new siding goes up?
A portion of the funds donated will go to a project to build special bat houses around the Playhouse grounds. That way the bats will have a new home next summer after we put up the new siding.
So we're saving the Playhouse and the environment at the same time?
That's right. For every mosquito bite you don't get at the BHP, you can thank a bat who has a house thanks to you.
But only if you click the link below to save the siding and save the bats.
And now the final act of the importance of being earnest.
Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
Well, in order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. Their explanations appear to have the stamp of truth upon them, especially Mr. Worthing's.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. Oh, I mean, no.
Oh, true. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
Oh, an excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all?
But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Mr. Worthing, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die?
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. But now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to marry Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
Indeed. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square.
That sounds not unsatisfactory, but what proof have I of its authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby? Ooh, a firm of the very highest position in their profession.
Lady Bracknell, I also have in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you. Oh, about £130,000. That's all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all of that. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He was at Oxford.
This afternoon, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Well, it will not be very long before she is of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think her guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray, excuse me, Lady Bracknell, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. Why, 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she's 35, a remark which I'm bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear.
Everything is quite ready for the christening.
The christening, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
As your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? What, did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism. Come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mentioned, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared, as usual, to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited that handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait for me here.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you here all my life.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
Seems to be mine. Yes, here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I'd had them placed there. Yes, this bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried.
Oh, unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthy, there has been some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Algy, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens. I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta, yes?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. All right, let's see. Generals, Malum, Marksby, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Marksby, Mobs, Moncrief, Lieutenant, 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1869, Christian name, Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, is it a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth? Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn. At last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Hi, I'm Tyne Furman. I played Algernon in Earnest back in 1987, and I am zooming into you from New York City.
And I'm Jim Newman. I directed this Zoom recreation of that original show, and I am calling in from Los Angeles. And although Tyne and I have gotten geographically as far away from the Black Hills as possible, both of our hearts keep returning to the Black Hills Playhouse.
So thank you for joining us for this cast reunion show.
And please click the link below to help save both the siding and the bats.
And if you are watching this when it first goes live, join us afterwards for our Zoom party, which is both an opening and closing night party.
We will be remembering Kim Detweiler from the original cast and Ron Moyer, who directed the original production.
We'll raise a glass in their honor and remember the legacy they left the Black Hills Playhouse.
A legacy that we are all hoping endures, and if we work together, it will.
So see you at the pit party.